training.
Yes. I just
Have you taken it, Sean?
I just powered through it today.
How is it?
It's actually, it's self-reflective. You'll go through it and you'll take the test and you'll kind of reflect on yourself and the biases that you may or may not possess unconsciously. Implicit bias, that's the big one.
Oh,
Training.
Yes.
have you taken it, Sean?
I just powered through it today.
Colby, I see Kevin Dees has also signed in.
Okay, thank you. We are recording and streaming now. Let me get Kevin on. Analyst. And now, Catherine, I'll hand it off to you, make you the host.
Great.
All right, let me know if you have host abilities right now.
I appear to have host abilities.
Perfect.
Host ability. Feel powerful. All right, well, we'll go ahead and open the meeting at 6:36 p.m. And we'll start with attendance. So just go through the list. Catherine Hatton here, Tess Taylor,
Here.
Kelly Cole,
Here.
Nick Baker, I believe is not here yet, but hopefully will be joining shortly. Next up is Ren.
Here.
Sean.
Here.
And Kevin Dees.
Here.
All right. Thank you all. First up on the agenda is voting on the minutes, and I'll go ahead and share my screen for just a moment. So we have 2 minutes to review and vote on. So motion A, approve the GTLNC June 8, 2021 Governmental Affairs Committee minutes. Do I have a first?
Sean.
Thank you, Sean. Do I have a second?
Ren.
Thank you, Ren. Any
Karen?
Sorry.
Sorry, Catherine, I apologize. Is it, and this may be proper, but if Sean wasn't at the meeting, can he provide a first?
I mean, theoretically, the best thing to do is to say anyone that didn't attend shouldn't first, second, or vote.
Okay.
So if we would like to get a different first, in all honesty, it's committee minutes.
Okay, that's fine. I just didn't know. Otherwise, I would have firsted them, but I wasn't there.
All right. And Nick, I believe you just joined, so I will go ahead and add you as present. Yes?
Yeah, here.
Thank you, Nick. All right. Any discussion on the June 8th governmental minutes? Hearing none, seeing none. And please, if you are attending, feel free to raise your hand if you would like to speak. All right, then let's go ahead and vote. Tess?
Yes.
Kelly?
I wasn't present.
I mean,
So
I
you're
wasn't,
abstaining?
Catherine, I wasn't present either.
Yeah, I recommend anyone that wasn't present abstain.
Okay, then I abstain.
I abstain.
Thank you. So Tess, you are abstaining. Kelly, you are abstaining. Nick? This is on the June 8th Governmental Affairs Committee minutes.
Yes.
So are you abstaining because you weren't there?
Yes.
Okay. Ren?
Yes.
Thank you. Sean?
I believe that was the one that it was just the three of us that one day.
That was probably environmental. This was governmental.
Okay, I'll abstain because I honestly can't remember, so I'll abstain.
Okay,
I just don't want to falsely say yes.
no problem. And Kevin,
I was not there, so abstain.
all right. I guess I'll vote yes because I listened to the entire meeting and was there and then wrote the minutes. So that is a vote of 2-0-5. Correct? Okay. Motion carries. On to motion B, approve GTLNC August 3rd, 2021 Governmental Affairs Committee minutes. Do I have a first?
Yes, first.
Is that Tess?
Tess, yes.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Ren,
Thank you, Ren. Any discussion on the minutes?
Just the same request that I've made at the general board meeting. Just that the person who takes the minutes include his or her name, just in case there's ever clarification needed, and it's not always the same person, obviously. Can that be done, Catherine?
I guess it can be. For committees, the chairs are obligated to produce the minutes. So it's a little bit redundant to me, but
Well, but I didn't know that, and I don't know that a member of the public would necessarily. And it's just an easy thing to include, and it's the norm and the protocol with any other board meeting minutes. So I think it would be good if you could.
okay. I would like to hold off on that until we come to a consensus on what all committees are doing.
Okay,
Just for uniformity's sake, if that's all right.
that's fine. I mean,
Okay. Anything else on the August meeting minutes?
they're very comprehensive. Thank you.
We tried. All right. Hearing none, seeing none, proceed to a vote. Tess,
Yes.
Kelly,
Abstain because I wasn't present.
thank you. Nick, Nick, are you muted?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Ren,
yes.
Sean,
Yes.
and Kevin.
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Motion carries 6-0-1. All right. So we were thinking that for this meeting, we would try something a little bit different and actually put online, we found an online timer that we can put on the screen so that people know how much time is left for speaking, just to be helpful for everybody. So we're going to test it out this meeting, see how it goes. This is an experiment, and we do apologize if it doesn't work very well. But we're going to start off with public comment, and I will go ahead and share the timer. And if there's any public comment, go ahead and raise your hand. And this is public comment on items not on the agenda. Okay. All right.
I have a question. Didn't we go through this and come up with 3 minutes rather than 2 minutes as being the requirement from done?
So there is no requirement from done specifically, but our bylaws have a little bit of confusion in them. In one place, it says 3 minutes, and in another place, it says that the chair can set the amount of time people can speak. And in general, there's not anything clarifying in the bylaws whether this applies to all committee meetings or just to general meetings, and whether it applies to the public comment section of the meeting or public comment on items. So we can go ahead and we can absolutely do, we can absolutely go ahead and say, minimize this, 3 minutes, in interest of not having this be a 3-hour meeting. I would recommend that when we get into the actual agenda items, we limit it to 2 minutes per person. And you can have a back and forth, like you can take a break from your 2 minutes and come back to it. All right. So let's go ahead and get into public comment. Jonathan, I'm going to put 3 minutes on the clock for you. So go
Right.
ahead. All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You know, I'll just speak kind of casually and let you know that my ambition is to make things really much easier than they might be otherwise if you didn't get any help from the community as far as editing and stuff. So on what you just said, I spent 4 hours last night on the bylaws and other things having to do with the organization. And what you just talked about, there's actually nothing incongruent, misaligned on the bylaws, but what's overlooked often is that before they go into the discussion on parliamentary procedure, it's pointed out in the bylaws that parliamentary procedure applies unless specifically voted for, that it won't apply. And if you go into parliamentary procedure, it's assigning a reasonable amount of time as 3 minutes and consistently allows for some determination of flexibility, both more and less. But it does need to be clarified. And in other words, nobody should have that opportunity to abuse it. What I did want to say to everybody, though, is I spent that time last night, and a lot of the time that I spent was editing and doing a lot of this just terrible work in putting a document together and pointing out things that need to be added and aligned with other things. Tess has a copy of my work, and I'm not going to get into the details here because it will drag down the meeting, and that won't achieve anything with all these people. It's kind of like you got to sit at a table and do the writing. It's just kind of like the math part. But what I did want to talk about was keeping it simple and staying to solving the problem. And the problem is essentially that board members have to have control over what goes on in the community. And that's only going to happen if you replicate what's going on at North Hollywood Northeast District, where, as Catherine in previous times mentioned, there's a phraseology about agenda setting that's quite simple. It simply states all agenda items must have a board member sponsor. And how you go about it can be broken down in terms of time and the order. But when I start hearing about executive committees approving rather than assembling, then you're adding layers of censorship and controls on a group of people. And that's exactly what this organization doesn't need. It will beautifully coexist with beautification partners, provided that Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council has the freedom to behave like a neighborhood council, and it isn't guided by a group of people. So it's very important for you to put down on paper that it is not a group of people from another corporation running the show. If it looks like that, you're headed for trouble. Thank you very much. I'm cut it.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. I will say anything related to bylaws, I'd like to ask people to hold it until the bylaws section of the agenda. But do we have any other public comment? Go ahead and raise your hand if you would like to make a public comment. Otherwise, we will go ahead and move on. All right. Next up is committee member news and announcements. And I will just very quickly make an announcement. As we mentioned earlier, the anti-bias training is available now in the Cornerstone system for all board members to take, and it is due on November 30th. All right. Any other committee member news and announcements?
Not from me.
Hearing none, seeing none, we will proceed to ongoing business. And Tess, do you want me to continue sharing the screen for this, or do you want?
I think, yeah, the timer is good if there's going to be public comment. So are we going to redistricting now?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So I want to thank you, Ren Blight, for pointing out that that hearing date for redistricting. I was aware that hearings were going on, but it was nice to have that brought specifically to my attention. I attended the redistricting hearing on Saturday, September, was it 4th? Yes, this past Saturday. And basically what redistricting is, for those who may be less familiar with it, it's every 10 years, the census occurs. And the idea is to make sure there are an equal number of people in every district for voting purposes. And this is a time when communities can comment and more or less negotiate or try to map lines for themselves that are more in line with what they want. So the hearings, I've only attended one, but I've done a little bit of research. There are two major themes that are coming out of the hearings. And one is, please don't break up my community. That's the main one. That was a large theme of the redistricting hearing on Saturday. What I wasn't aware of is that Koreatown, I believe, has been broken into 3, maybe even 4 city council districts with the last redistricting, and which according to them may even be illegal. So they are very annoyed with that, because it basically means they have to run from pillar to post in order to get city services. So that's just one example of something that one would want to avoid. That's the first theme. The other theme is don't cross Mulholland. The Valley district should be in the Valley, and districts to the south should be to the south. Our district, CD4, looks like a plate of spaghetti that's been flung violently to the floor. It's got the strangest shape to it that one has ever seen. And I think some changes to that would be useful if our entire district were in the Valley. I don't know that how strongly I feel about that, but it certainly makes logical sense when city services come into play. I also think that we have to look to the future. With redistricting, it seems likely, at least this is what I see from reading the tea leaves, that Kerkorian very much wants Toluca Lake to be in part of CD2. And 10 years ago, when this redistricting took place, I believe Herb Wesson was president of the city council at the time, and he didn't want to get involved in a dust up. So he let Tom LaBonge, the then CD4 council member, and Kerkorian sort it out, and LaBonge sort of won, but Kerkorian very much would like to have Toluca Lake become part of his district. So that would be interesting. Although Kerkorian terms out in 2024, what would that mean for Toluca Lake and the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council? Generally speaking, they like to keep the neighborhood councils districts together. So it seems unlikely, although certainly possible, that we would remain together, the 4 neighborhoods that currently comprise the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council. But I think it's certainly something worth looking at and weighing in on. We provided all of the meeting dates in the agenda. So I invite people and encourage folks to look at that. We also
Tess, on that, if I may, just for 1 second,
Sure.
on many levels, it would help us to be in the proper district on many levels.
And the proper district being what?
Being part of the Valley, being in 2. Because one of the biggest problems that we have with homelessness is dealing with the fact that people always say that if we try to relocate anybody from our area into Kerkorian and keep them in the Valley, like if we go to North Hollywood, that's out of our district, which is ridiculous. It's down the street. And the reason that it's out of our district is because anyway, it presents a host of problems that are negative. It becomes a trade-off. And if you talk to Nithia's people about specifically dealing with homelessness, it's a thing that they have.
Well, I think there's a lot of good reasons and a lot of good arguments for us to all be in the Valley. I'm going to want to ask Ren Blight about this specifically in a moment. Let me just wrap up my opening comments and then we can discuss it because there's a lot of, lot that we can talk about here if desired. So, but the distribution of services is certainly very, very important. And how our district, our CD4 district got to be such an odd shape, splattered all over the, the valley and and Wilshire is just is very unusual. But in any case, let's see, we are able, if we would like, let me see here, we can put forward a CIS, a community impact statement. There's also a community of interest statement or testimony that may be put forward. And I'm not exactly clear what the community of interest is, although I assume it might be like, for example, in Koreatown, Koreans or a certain group of people and so forth. I didn't look up the exact definition at the LA Redistricting website prior to the meeting, but we can certainly submit that. They're working with Empower LA to spread the word about redistricting hearings and would very much encourage folks to attend. And I think it would be a good idea, Nick, for you to do so as well. You can see all of the dates that I've provided on the agenda and the links where you can go for more information. So there's a whole process set up with this. They're putting together the draft map now and the drawing of the maps and the drawing of the districts. So I think it's very, very important. And the way that districts are drawn can have a huge effect on voting, as we know. So those are my my remarks. Any questions? And then I have a question for Ren. Any discussion on the matter? I guess not. So Ren, so you've been at this for longer than most of us. What is your opinion on having all of our neighborhood council district or our neighborhood council district being absorbed by CD2 as just as a matter of practicality? Is that good for us? Is that not so good?
Well, I think in a lot of ways it makes life easier because we're then in a district that has a lot more similarities to us than the current district. Just to go back historically, the reason they have these council districts that kind of go over the hill, if you will, is because a while back, the Valley was trying to secede and create itself as its own city. There were a number of good arguments for that. There were other arguments against it. But anyway, it didn't quite make it. But the council people were, and the mayor were very concerned. And one of the ways they wanted to offset some of the problems that were coming out of the Valley was to, in effect, have more than 5 or 6 council people representing the Valley and have, in effect, I think we had 8 or 9 council people who had at least some Valley constituency. So it kind of offset the argument that the Valley was always a permanent minority when there was voting on the city council.
And how has that worked out in effect? Has it worked out as planned?
I think it has up to some extent. I think the whole notion of having the Valley secede it hasn't gone away, but it's much more muted. Too many of the problems that the city has are citywide. The Valley really is not. We have all the same problems, or most of the same problems that the rest of the city has at this point. So. Being a separate city, I don't think works too well. And the other thing is that, at this point, the Valley is 1 million people, so it will be a big city. A lot of people wanted to somehow become a city that had a lot of local control and input where people could, run down to City Hall and attend a meeting and that kind of thing. But if the whole Valley was a city, why, you wouldn't have that local feel, whatever. Mm-hmm. Neighborhood councils were set up for the same reason, so that local areas could have some input, have some feeling like there's local discussion and input on issues. So I think to some extent, the neighborhood councils have helped offset that as well. So
Well, yeah, I think the neighborhood council system was a sort of a giveaway or a something to help mute the eagerness to secede. So then when they were formed about what, 19, 20 years ago?
yeah.
Right.
So yeah, it was 2005 and 6 when they really got going, and yeah, a lot of it was around just giving people some sense that they didn't have to go down to City Hall and you know, fight their way through thousands of people to stand in front of the council and make a point. And I think neighborhood councils have served that role quite a bit. There's a lot of local input on it now, and
So
thing is a good example of that.
to summarize, because I know that Catherine has got the timer running. So to summarize, Ren, you would be in favor of our neighborhood council district rolling over to CD2.
Or yeah, one of the valley districts. I assume
Okay.
two is the most logical.
Okay.
When they get done drawing these things, you know, all sorts of interesting things have gone on in the past. So you have to watch and be careful. Don't assume that it's going to turn out right. You have to be there at the table.
Oh, I've been actually reading quite a lot about it, and I know also that Adrian Nazarian is terming out as our assembly member in 2024. And since he's a protege of Krikorian, it seems a fairly, you know, not exactly a fait accompli, but certainly possible, if not likely, that he will run for that CD council position. So
I would caution us against making anything vaguely political statement about like
Okay.
who's going to run for a position.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Anyway, so since we only have about 3 minutes left, I wonder if, unless you have anything further to add, Ren, do we have any further comments or discussion?
So I have one question, which is, given the timeline and the draft map will be adopted, it looks like September 28th, so at the end of this month. And then the final map will be adopted October 21st, so late next month. What if we were, as a neighborhood council, interested in submitting any sort of CIS community impact statement? Would we need to do that in the month of September? Or
good question.
is this something that could be done in October?
I have asked the head of engagement and outreach for the redistricting commission, Robert Battles, what the deadline is. And he gave me a lot of information, but he didn't exactly answer that question. So I don't know, but I'm going to follow up with him and I'm going to send him an email again, send him another email. So my feeling is it would have to happen soon. So,
okay. I will note there is a citywide public hearing scheduled for September 11th, which is this Saturday. For anyone that is interested in attending.
And the fact is that you can testify at any hearing, no matter which council district you're in. So even though the September 8th public hearing is focused on Council District 8, we could testify, you know, any individual here could testify there as well and, you know, provide testimony. So you're not restricted from doing that.
Thank you. Very quickly, I'd like to just open it up. Are there any questions from the public? I want to make sure you all feel comfortable raising your hands if you do have any questions or anything to say on this item. Hearing none, seeing none. Tess, anything else on the redistricting to cover?
Let's see. I have a bunch of notes here. I think that's it. Yeah, those are the highlights. I'd be
Yeah,
happy to
what-
discuss. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, one thing we need to, of course, be aware of that the Assembly District, the State Senate District, congressional districts, all being redone too, and we need to kind of keep an eye on those things. We have a lot less input on those, but we ought to at least know where we're going to end up on those things as well.
Well, and where would we like to end up? What would be ideal for us?
Well, I think that's
That's a
primarily
complicated question.
we don't want to be split up. That's one obvious thing.
Okay.
I don't want half of Toluca Lake going one way and another half going into another Senate or congressional district or any of that. I don't think that's likely.
Okay.
But each congressional district, for example, has a certain characteristic, and so a lot of this has political implications, which I don't think the neighborhood council needs to weigh in on. I don't think we have a political particular bent, so I don't think we're worried about that so much. But it's something the community ought to be aware is going on. Maybe that's our role, is to just let people know what's actually happening, and people can react as they will.
Well, districts can definitely be manipulated and not necessarily for the good. So yeah, I think we need to let people know. And thank you for bringing that to my attention.
And I believe California is a state that has an independent commission that draws our districts. It is not done by the state legislature. So that does help reduce the undue political influence.
Can you repeat that, Catherine, that the state of California has what exactly?
We have an independent commission that
Okay.
does the districts. A lot of states, it's the state legislature that draws it. And so
Okay.
they oftentimes have political intentions, but California does not allow
How
the state
interesting.
legislature to do
Okay,
it.
I didn't know that. Good, thank you.
All right. In the interest of time, I'd like us to move on, and I'm going to briefly switch sharing.
I think we have some echoing here.
Yeah, if everyone can go ahead and mute themselves when you are not speaking, that would be helpful. All right, hopefully up on the screen, you can all see both the agenda and the timeanddate.com timers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great. So the next agenda item, and I'll go ahead and start the timer for 15 minutes, is short-term changes to the GTLNC bylaws. There is one motion here, motion C. Approve the following change to the GTLNC bylaws. Replace Article 5, Section 3, official actions with every act done or decision made by a simple majority vote by the council members present and voting, excluding abstentions, which do not count toward the voting total, at a meeting at which a quorum is present, shall be regarded as the act of the council, unless otherwise required by these bylaws or the law. Governing board members may not vote by proxy. Can I get a first to open discussion?
First from Tess.
Thank you, Tess. Can I get a second to open discussion?
Nick, open.
Thank you, Nick. And I'll go ahead and start my time. The reason this was done is because our bylaws currently state that abstentions act as a yes vote. We would like to remove that so that abstentions truly count as abstaining. You are not participating in the vote. It does not count as a yes or a no. And in case anyone is wondering where it says unless otherwise required by these bylaws or the law, there are a handful of places where, for instance, bylaw changes require a 2/3 vote, not a simple majority. And I believe there's another instance with removal where it requires a majority vote of all board members, not just board members present. All right, I will go ahead and open it up for discussion on the item.
I have a question. So
Go
what
ahead.
if we don't have quorum? What happens there? That was the only part I was confused about.
If there is no quorum, then no action can be taken. You can still have a meeting and have conversations, but you cannot vote on any motions. You cannot make an action.
Perhaps this is further down in the agenda, but there was something about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but something about changing quorum from the level it is now to a different number, or am I incorrect?
You're absolutely correct. So we currently, as you can see on the screen, quorum is set at 9 board members. And we are going to have a conversation later on about whether or not we should lower that to more than 50% of sitting board members. Right now, the 9 comes from the fact that we used to have a 16-member board, so 9 would be quorum. It's more than half. We now have a 15-member board when you include the youth seat, so quorum would be 8, and that didn't get automatically changed when the Dunn made the changes to the total number of youth seats without any consultation with us. All right, I'm going to go ahead and Jonathan, I believe you are able to unmute yourself and speak.
Yes, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Mine is a question I had read something about if you change your bylaws, there are only certain windows in the course of the year that the department will approve them. And without an approval, they don't go into force. Can you explain anything you know about that?
That is correct. So we are currently in an open bylaw period, and that is usually between about July and April, and my time is up, so I'll be very quick. That's not necessarily available every year. It was not available last year when we tried to make the same change. And Dunn controls that, and it's not a set time every single year.
But on that same question, Catherine, I know that you've been in touch with Gibson and he just responded a day or two ago that it would be possible to make this one change and submit it now, and that followed by more changes later, correct?
Correct.
Yes, okay.
Currently, bylaws are available to be changed until April 1st of next year.
All right.
Any other discussion on this proposed change to the bylaws?
Well, I have one last question. Any idea why it was written like this to begin with?
Ren, do you happen to be familiar? Is this a product of the way the state legislature law used to be set up?
I have no idea. It just popped up, and it certainly, to my understanding, doesn't follow Robert's Rules of Order or any other follow city council policy that I'm aware of. I mean, it seems odd. One thing, the city council, I guess, they have the voting machines, or at least they used to. Each council person would vote, and oftentimes the council people would wander around, and you could see they weren't at their desk when there was a vote taken, but their machine was automatically set on a yes vote unless they went over and specifically voted no. So there was this kind of undercurrent but I didn't think it was formal. I'd never seen it in writing until I heard it from Dunn. So I think this is a good motion. I think we want to get back where an abstention is effectively a person not voting.
Yeah, I've never seen this before either. Strange.
All right, Jonathan, do you still have your hand up? Did you have more to say
No,
or?
I did not.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and
Sorry,
lower your
I
hand.
did it. Thanks.
Oh, don't worry about it. All right, any further discussion on this motion? To exclude abstentions from the voting total. All right, then we'll go ahead and proceed to a vote. Do a roll call. Tess, how do you vote?
Yes.
Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
Ren,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. So motion carries 7-0-0. Thank you all. This does not officially pass the motion, like to actually change the bylaws. This will now be voted on at the general meeting later this month. And it must receive 2/3 vote to actually be approved to be a bylaw change, to be submitted to Dunn.
Okay.
And then, of course, it has to be approved by Dunn. All right.
Do we have a history of Dunn rejecting bylaws changes by us or anyone else?
Yeah, they definitely have. I don't know any specific ones that more recently have been rejected, but they absolutely have rejected changes in the past.
Okay.
All right, Tess, I will hand it over to you to lead the discussion on section C, which unfortunately is across a page break, and I do apologize, guys, for that.
That's all right. So, by the way, I just got an update from Redistricting. They said, I understand we are accepting, he says, COI and maps from the public through September 17th. Now, COI are community of interest, not community impact statements. So it's still not entirely clear, but he did give me a September 17th deadline. And I don't know why it would be different for CIS as opposed to a community of interest statement. But let's just put maybe a pencil mark September 17th. So, and let's see, if our general board meeting is on the 21st, we might not be able to make that in time unless there was a special meeting. But what do you advise, Catherine?
I think that we maybe need to talk to the executive committee and to Colby and see whether or not this is something that we want to call a special meeting for. I will note in our bylaws, a special meeting can be called by a majority of the board, I think. Since we have them available to us.
Right. Ren, do you have an opinion on that? Whether we should put in a community impact statement or not?
He's muted.
Ren, you're muted. Ren doesn't know that he's muted.
Muted.
Ren, you're muted.
There we go.
So Ren, you were
Talking to
muted.
myself.
Do you have an opinion on whether the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council should submit a community impact statement on redistricting or not?
I don't think there's a strong need for it.
Okay.
We might have a quick meeting and just get in that we want to be part of a valley district. But I don't know how strongly people feel about that. I think it's kind of a given at this point. I think we're very likely to end up either primarily or completely whole valley district.
Yeah, it couldn't hurt, but I will confirm that date and email everybody. So thank you.
Thank you. All right.
So we're going to go to bylaws now, and we thought 30 minutes would be a good amount of time to just sort of dig in. We're not going to get to everything tonight necessarily, but we want to just get an overview. Tonight is an open dialogue, and I think an opportunity for all of us to feel like we're working together. I'm going to moderate this section of the program. We want to share this time together and be as economical as we can with our comments. So if we agree with something that someone says, let's just say so and then move on so we can use this time as effectively as possible. If we can't reach a consensus, well, we can, continue to have a discussion about it at a later meeting. We just want to have some highlights here and show that we value everybody's input. So we're going to winnow down the changes now, or at least start to winnow down the changes down to action items that we can refine and define. And I want to make this as fair and equitable as possible. Well, I want the administration and the management of our own self-governance to be as fair and equitable as possible. This is not someone else's organization. This is our organization, and we should treat it as though it has value and importance, which it does, even though it is the most basic and smallest unit of democracy. This is how our democracy functions. So I think the bylaws are very important. So I obviously have my own thoughts, but I want to be generous and make sure everybody is heard tonight. And I want us to make sure that we're sharing this time. We want to hear from everybody's ideas, and we'll put them all together, and then we'll go from there. So Catherine and I have spent a fair amount of time on going over the bylaws and the standing rules, and there's still work to be done. But I recommended that we just use a bullet point list tonight. I don't want to cause people's eyes to glaze over with a red line, because we're still in the middle of drafting and discussing, and there are a lot of open questions that I'm sure people here will have opinions about, which we want to hear. So starting at the top of this list, internal boundaries. I think internal boundaries are probably important. And there's the at-large versus the regional representative benefits. I want to know how people feel about that. And does everybody understand what the differences between at-large and regional representatives are? And perhaps, Ren, you could explain that or just define it for us.
Sure. Right now, we're all elected by a region-wide or the whole neighborhood council area. If we were to cut it up into different sections where, say, 3 or 4 members would be representing, west Toluca Lake, another group would be up in the north, another group would be in the south. So it would be physically limited. A number of neighborhood councils are set up so that they're representatives of different interest groups. So you have homeowners, renters, business people, and so forth. So you have a different kind of a split on the neighborhood council, so that only business people, for example, can vote for the business representative. So that's that always seemed to me to be more difficult, and with the larger neighborhood councils, why I think it works all right for us. I mean, when we only get 250 people showing up to vote, if we start breaking it up into districts, then theoretically somebody could get elected in one of the neighborhoods with 14 or 18 votes. So that's, to me, that could be problematic, but whatever works. People want to be, we shouldn't break it up into a lot of small neighborhoods. I don't think that would work. If each person represented, 1/15 of the area, that's right. Problematic for sure.
No, I think there are good arguments to be made on both sides. But Kelly, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify one thing, and Ren, you know better than I think, but my understanding is that not only can you have people running for a general constituency, whether it's geographical or it's the youth or, you know, renters or something like that. But the voting for the actual election, sometimes it has to be that only renters, not only renters, but only people in, let's say, Toluca Lake West can vote for the Toluca Lake West rep. But in other councils, you can, everyone, like all 12,500 of us could vote for all the seats, even if they don't live in Toluca Lake West, that kind of thing. So you have representatives, people running to represent particular areas, but the general public can vote for all the seats.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's one way I know that they do it. And I do have to say one thing, point of pride, which is we only have 250, 300 people vote, but percentage wise, because we only have 12,500, we are actually one of the highest percentages of all the neighborhood councils in terms of turnout in the last 2 elections.
So
That's a good point. Yeah.
any other thoughts on that? At large versus representatives? Sean, Nick, Kevin?
If I could jump in.
Sure.
I think Ren made an excellent point that, you know, if you start carving it up, it can be sort of difficult. And obviously, Kelly, there's a workaround to everyone can vote for all of the positions, whether or not they meet the qualifications to actually serve in those specific seats. But I'm inclined to stay away from that, just given the size of our neighborhood, because we are such a small neighborhood council district. That would be my thought.
I do have one other thing I would like to add about it. I think it is more complicated to do it this way, to have representative seats. But I also think when you have other strong organizations in a community like we do in Toluca Lake, it sometimes is very difficult to have some of the more underrepresented folks win, because, you know, like the different entities that we have, like Garden Club or HOA, those sorts of things, they send out, you know, they send out voting cards to their members saying vote for these people. So that makes it difficult for people that represent maybe other interests to get elected. So the idea that we would somehow split it up a little bit so that, you know, we have a little bit more representation makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's a good point,
Thank
Kelly.
you.
Kevin has his hand up, and then Jonathan.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Tess, I know you talk a lot, which, well, actually, first I'll say, I think, you know, not just Toluca Lake proper, as people like to say, but West Toluca Lake, Toluca Woods, all the surrounding areas being the best that they can be helps everybody. And I know that, Tess, you have fought hard to make sure that Toluca Lake West is better served.
West
and
Toluca
so as far
Lake,
as
the whole district.
Sorry, you know what I mean. So anyway, I just think that this is actually an interesting idea, because I know that we only get a certain amount of money from the city, but if it were to become its own thing and be able to serve the people of that part of the area better, maybe that's an interesting concept. I hadn't thought about that.
Well, good. Thank you. I mean, you know, we want to make it work for everybody. And so this is just an open discussion now. So thank you, Kevin. I think Jonathan has his hand up.
Thank you. On internal boundaries, you're talking about representative benefits, but I don't actually think that that's a problem in Toluca Lake in this council. Rather, I think where it's needed, the internal boundaries are what showed up before, is we need more reporting. And that might serve to stimulate more participation from the public in the neighborhood council. In other words, if we went to the website and there was board members assigned to different internal boundary areas, such as West Toluca Lake or whatever the different areas call themselves, and there was a report on of what's going on in that particular area in terms of I forget the word that the neighborhood council uses for programs to improve the landscape or whatever. There's a special word that you use. I've forgotten it.
Neighborhood purpose grants.
Yeah, but they call it something like incentive. I can't remember. But in any case, using the internal boundaries rather than talking about representative or voting and all that, I think it's more important to use it as a reporting on what benefits are being pushed out into these different areas so that the people and what problems are being experienced so that people can identify with the area but know who they're a part of in the greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's good. So
If I could just weigh in on this, I would stick with that large without a doubt, because I just think we're so small. So that would just be my only input.
okay. Yeah, I mean, reporting, that's a good idea too, Jonathan. All right. So we're not really going to vote on this. We're just sort of taking in ideas right now, but this is good fodder. So I think we can move on to the next point unless somebody has anything else to say on boundaries and at-large versus regional reps. Let's go to youth board members, terms and extensions. So the youth board members, we're now at 1 youth board member, and they can be up to 18 between, what is the exact age?
15
Catherine?
18, I believe.
Yeah, so you have to be between 14 and 17 years old when appointed.
Okay,
And so that means you can turn 18 during your term and continue
Okay.
serving.
can turn. Okay, so, and the question is, I don't know that anyone objects to having a youth board member. I don't, as long as they're not voting on financial matters. And then the question is, how are they going to, how will the extension work? Their term can be extended, I think, 3 times. So for 3 years, according to our current bylaws. Do we want that? Do we want something different? Yeah, this is composition section 1. Any discussion on the matter? We have a hand up, Jonathan. Jonathan, youth board member, you're up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot to unmute. In any case, on this particular area having to do with the youth member, there's a perversion that occurs in the bylaws in this paragraph, as well as another one having to do with vacancies or replacing people as board members. And what it says is the president nominates, the youth member is nominated by the president and approved by the majority of the board, in essence. I'm not quoting it. I think that's weird. I just think the president is, it doesn't make any sense to me. And it's supposed to be the majority of the board that is deciding on who this youth member is, not the president. That's what's wrong with these bylaws, is there's way too much leaning onto the one person so that it's not representative. I hope the council, the board members will eliminate that nomination process and simply make it a vote of the council that determines who this is. Any board member won't be able to nominate. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I have a quick comment, or 2 quick comments. In our red line, we did begin the process of changing this so that the youth board seat, like any other vacancy, we would like to have it be a selection by the board. So the board would vote between people, similar to how we select our executive committee every year by actually voting amongst candidates. And I also proposed actually defining the term of the youth board member, because right now it's not defined anywhere in the board. Or anywhere in the bylaws. It's not clear if it is 2 years like all other governing board members, or, I mean, we've been doing it as 1 year, but there's nothing in the bylaws that says anything about how long they actually serve.
So any other comments? Well, I'll just weigh in. I think a term definition would be really important. And I also agree I also agree that I think this should be up to the board to decide. I mean, after all, that's what, we're there to make these decisions. So I would like to see that happen as well. So unless there's any more discussion on this point, we can go to the next one.
I have one question. Isn't it already up to the board though to suggest candidates for this role?
For the youth board member, yes.
Yeah.
I believe we can propose or put forward, yes, but we don't get to vote on them as the bylaws are presently drafted. So I propose that we be able to do that.
And so is the issue that we don't want the president, or some people feel that the president shouldn't have that authority? Is that what the issue is?
Well, I think the better alternative is to have the board vote on the board members, youth or otherwise.
Can I speak, Tess?
That makes sense?
Yeah, I think Jonathan has his hand up again.
Okay, Jonathan, go ahead.
Thank you. I just read the bylaws on this last night, and the president nominates, and from those nominated youth members, the board votes. So the president controls who the board members are voting for, if there's multiple candidates that are, okay, so it is controlled first by the president. The board doesn't get to pick somebody if it isn't previously nominated by the president. So the president has fundamental control, and that's what's wrong. The other thing, any discussion, the board members should be aware what this youth member does. Votes for everything except things having to do with financial votes. So that this youth member can actually make things go different ways depending on how the votes are. It is rather important that the youth member chosen that the board be comfortable with it, and that it isn't somebody chosen by one person.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Can I just make one clarifying point?
Sure.
So what happens is basically there's a request for candidates that's made, and the president would, at this moment, the president would select from the candidates that they receive someone to nominate for appointment, and the board would basically vote to confirm, not dissimilar to how the Senate votes to confirm cabinet nominees or Supreme Court justices. So they don't get to pick. And while we can ostensibly make suggestions and nominations, we don't have a process right now defined in our bylaws or in standing rules related to how we even need to inform people of this available seat, or how to receive nominees, or how they're being considered. But we'd like to change that. We'd like to have a process.
Yeah, I'd like to have a clear process. And I would like to have the board, have more say in that. So
Can I just say one more thing?
Sure.
Just out of curiosity, at the meeting before the last meeting, though, I remember Colby mentioning that there was going to be this youth board member seat, and I don't believe anybody came forward with anybody. There were two candidates that spoke, and then I believe Colby gave a few more days, and Tess, you were going to reach out, and then I don't know if that happened or not, if other people. So anyway, I'm not saying I'm not open to this change, but it just seems like the board does have a say in the people that we're choosing from. It's not like we don't at all. And it just kind of seems like maybe a move to take away, power from the president.
Well, I think it needs
we all would,
Well, I think it needs to be equitably distributed amongst the board. And I do recall that conversation, and I do
equitable.
What's that?
How and in what way does it need to be equitable? Because it seems like it already is equitable.
I respectfully disagree. And I'd like to see the process defined. And I did reach out to people, and unfortunately wasn't able to get a response from the YMCA Youth Government Director in time. She's been non-responsive, unfortunately, after my first communication with her. So, we should have some dates in there, some deadlines.
Totally get that. All I'm saying is that everybody had a month to propose people and nobody did. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, well, that is true. So are there any other comments on this point?
Yeah,
I want to emphasize this is not about okay, I want to emphasize this is not about an individual situation. This is about setting us up for the future so that there aren't issues, and having a process, including things about how to announce vacancies and deadlines, would be helpful.
No, that's cool. And I'm just pointing out how it kind of transpired. That's all. So I'm not trying to start a fight with anybody.
Yeah. One side comment? I'm muted now. One side comment here. We're talking about young people who would probably, at least some of them, would have difficulty running, for an office and trying to get votes and so forth. I think the idea was to have it be, a little more informal and easier for the youth to kind of come in and get experience without having to go through the formalities of getting adults to vote for them. Because some kids are, they won't even approach that. And I think we might miss some really good input from students, other people that would be young people that would, they'd be reluctant to formally run for an office, but on the other hand, could give us a lot of input about, what the needs are in the youth community. So anyway, that's a different perspective, maybe.
Well, I totally agree. And I don't think anything would change based on nothing of what you have said would change based on what we're discussing and thrashing around here. And yeah, I don't think it would be necessarily good to have them go through a formal election process. So it's daunting enough for adults. All right. So with that, let's move to the next item. We're moving right along here. And so the next item is, quorum. 9 versus greater than 50% of the sitting governing board members, but no fewer than 7. I think having I have different ideas on this. Why don't Ren tell us what you think?
We haven't had a problem with getting quorums generally. I mean, over the life of the whole operation. I think there were a couple of times maybe where we weren't quite sure we were going to have a quorum, but I think we've always had a quorum. So I don't think it's been a real issue.
Okay.
So for what it's worth.
All right. Any other discussion on the matter? Thoughts, suggestions on quorum? Catherine, what do you think?
Before she jumps in, I'll just say that I think it just should be based on the math, based on the math. And, if right now the quorum is 9, as the way the bylaws are state, we're actually a little bit beyond the 50% plus.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should just be adjusted. I mean, obviously it's one less person, but as it stands now. So perhaps if we were just a little bit more in line with the math, I think that would probably be best for us.
Good point. Kelly Cole has her hand up.
Mm-hmm. I just think I agree. It should be 50% plus 1, just because that's consistent with the definition, and it doesn't matter if we have a youth member or not, if it's 50% plus 1.
Okay. All right, good. Catherine, did you have a thought?
I just want to jump in and say the reason I proposed no fewer than 7 is because there's always the possibility that, 1 or 2 sitting board members depart, and that would lower us to a quorum that would be 7. And that's pretty low, especially given some of our committees. I mean, this committee has 6 board members. That's getting us dangerously close to what could potentially be quorum if there are only, 11 board members left or something. So I would like us to put a floor on it.
I agree. Okay. Any thoughts on that? All right. Good. So it looks like stick with the math, 50% plus one, no fewer than 7. And certainly we'll, we'll put this out there in a draft form, and further discussion is possible, but that was an easy one. Let's take our win and move to the next point. The next item is, let's see, process for, term limits. Currently 8 years versus consecutive versus non-consecutive. How do we feel about that?
Let's see.
No comments?
Well, just speaking from my personal experience, I've served, a couple of, maximum limits and been off, cycled off, stayed active, but was not a voting member for years, a 4-year break at one point, but then ran again and came back on. I don't know whether, I think it's good to have, whether it's 8 years or even as little as 6 years, but then have a break time. And then if the person stays active, allow them to run again.
Okay, so a maximum of consecutive, a break, and then re-up.
Yeah.
Nick, I know you,
turn.
sorry, I know Nick had strong feelings about term limits. Nick going once?
I wouldn't say strong feelings. I mean, I don't know how applicable they are.
Okay.
I mean, here's the thing. My feelings on term limits are, to be honest, they're lazy in democracy. It should be on the people to unelect people who aren't good. And I think there can be a result of, not having term limits that's bad, but it also means you're disqualifying people arbitrarily who might be the best for the job. And that's the thing that always worries me about rules like that. I get it. I understand why people do that, but that's just my sort of global argument on the issue.
That's worthwhile. And then I guess we just need to be clear if there's ever going to be removal, how that process, perhaps more clarity on how that process would occur. But I think that's all good logic. We had a question from Kevin and then from Jonathan. Go ahead, Kevin.
I was just going to what Ren said makes a lot of sense. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all volunteers and we all want what's best for the community. And, if somebody's still engaged and they term out, but then, based on the rule, they have to wait a period of time if they want to be back engaged, I don't really have a problem with that.
I don't think
again,
I do either. Yeah. Okay.
We're all volunteers, and so that's it.
Okay. Thank you. Jonathan, and then I believe Sean. Jonathan, go ahead.
Thank you. I think term limits is not such a big deal if the bylaws distribute the power. It's only when you've got power that's too focused in certain individuals rather than distributed. And that's why I focus on my focus on the bylaws has to do with distributing power so that presidents aren't doing things that their nomination processes can be distributed. Everything has to be looked at carefully to make sure that there's no concentration of any group of people that overstay their visit because they have something else going on. If you have proper distribution of powers, then term limits don't so much matter. It's like Nick says, you don't want to lose good people, and it's a real apathetic world we're living in. So you don't want to do something that alienates a valuable worker. On the other hand, you got to make sure that the bylaws are set up so that everyone has a say and there's a balance of power. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Jonathan. Sean, go ahead.
The only other thing I'd want to ask or maybe suggest is if there is a break, like Ren said, which is actually a really good idea, we should probably define the term of what that minimum or maximum time period is for that break. That's all.
Okay, very good. Break is okay, but define it. All right. I think we're good. Okay, so that's excellent. We're moving right along.
One quick thing, I'll just say,
Yes.
I like that idea, maybe 8 years within a 10-year period that forces you to basically take a term off.
Okay, that's a good idea within a 10-year period. All right, I'm writing all this down. Next up, process for appointing liaisons. And currently, let's read that section. Do you have that pulled up there, Catherine? The council has an inherent interest in many issues which transcend its boundaries. As such, the council may participate in wider ranging political processes, meet with other groups, and enter into agreements with other neighborhood council organizations. Unless otherwise determined or designated by the council, the president may designate one or more members or stakeholders to attend and participate on behalf of the council in such meetings and organizations. Well, I have a thought on that, but anyone else first? All right.
An example of that, the chair appointed me the liaison to the mayor's homeless committee. And so I attended meetings at least once a month downtown for, to be the liaison with the mayor's office and the homeless program there.
Okay. I mean, I think
it's an example of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I know what it is. I guess I think it's a good idea as long as, I mean, I know at times that a neighborhood council may only appoint one or two liaisons. So if that should occur and there's only room for one, but more than one person wants it, perhaps a process should be defined by which the liaison is selected. I'd like to just see that defined. I don't know that it's I toss and turn at night worrying about this particular section of the bylaws, but I think it should be clarified. So any other thoughts on that? Catherine, do you have a thought?
Sure. I would just say, as long as we put in the opportunity for the council to reject a liaison selection if they feel that that's not the appropriate person, I think that's fine.
Okay, good. So perhaps a little bit more of a definition there. Very good. Okay, so moving to the next item, vacancies, public notice, agendizing, vote ties, etc. Putting people in on a pro tempore basis, timing with respect to elections. So there are a few items here of note, which is when somebody, let's say, moves or resigns. How do we handle that? We've had, I think, a couple of instances. This predates me, but I understand that previous board members have either moved or left the area, but didn't immediately resign. Do we want to have some clarification on what should occur when somebody's stakeholder status changes, if they leave the area, if they move, or if they resign? This sort of ties into a resignation process and time frame, further down on my list of bullet points. So thoughts on that?
If I could just jump in.
Of course.
So I looked at a couple other bylaws for other neighborhood councils, and several of them have a vacancy process that includes sort of the schedule for how vacancies should be filled, how much time you need to give notice, when it would be agendized, and also how to vote on it. So I more or less wholesale copied another neighborhood council's process when it came to the vote, which is sort of a automatic runoff that happens where, the top two vote getters for the candidates to fill the vacant seat would then go into a runoff, and the board would vote again to select between them. And I thought it made complete sense for how it works for the voting, how it works for breaking ties. And as far as resignation, we did receive a specific request from Jonathan to put in a resignation process. And again, just defining it and saying you have to submit it to the full board And, you know, do you have to do it within 30 days of losing your stakeholder status, within 10 days of losing your stakeholder status, just sort of defining that. I would like to see us do it.
Yeah, I would just like to see greater definition here. Any thoughts, Ren? You're muted, Ren. And then we'll go to Kelly.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to this. Yeah, I think
Okay.
it should be formalized. You're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kelly, you had some thoughts?
I definitely agree it should be formalized. I also think that should be clearly known to all current board members that a position is open.
Okay. So it needs to be announced.
Or
right?
before any decisions are made on it.
Kelly, you're a little bit faint. Could you say that again?
I just think that that all the boards should know that there's an open position. And if it affects an executive committee position, they'll have time to submit themselves or,
Okay.
be.
All right. Very good. Any other thoughts on this item? Okay, excellent. We're moving right along. Thank you, guys. So
Tess, I will just flag, we got past the 30 minutes
Okay.
a little while ago. Do we want to move on to standing rules? Do we want to see how far we can get on this? It's 5 till 8.
Why don't we, okay, so we've been at it for an hour and a half. Well done, everybody. We can continue with the agenda. We can jump to the standing rules. Or we can end the meeting if folks have to go. So there's 3 alternatives. Is that all right with you, Catherine?
Yeah.
Okay, so those in favor of continuing to slog a bit through the agenda, I guess raise your hand. All right, Sean, Nick, Kelly.
I can't raise my hand as host, apparently.
Okay, so
But
are
I'll
you
raise
raising your hand, Catherine?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Okay. Attendees, or do we see any hands raised? No. Jonathan. All right. Okay, so I guess we're gonna slog through. Shall we say another 15
I have
minutes?
I have a 3-year-old. I'm gonna have to go, guys, but thank you
Okay.
so much.
All right. Well, good luck to your 3-year-old, Kevin. And I think shall we continue for 15 minutes, Catherine, and then end the meeting?
Sounds great.
Okay, good, because we don't want to keep people up for hours and hours. All right, so Kevin left the meeting at 7:57. Thank you, Kevin.
Still here, but leave.
Oh, okay, all right. So, so are you leaving or not?
No, I'm leaving. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you
Good night.
very much. All right, so let's get to the next item. 15 minutes. Catherine has set the timer. Define absences and when these result in removal. So yeah, I think we certainly want board members to participate, and I think also an excused absence should be defined, because I think, as I understand it now, when somebody writes to the president and says, I can't be there on Tuesday, then that is considered an excused absence. But if somebody does that 8 times, does that, how does that play out? So excused absences, any questions, comments, statements on that? Nick? Nick, your hand is still up. Do you want to comment on excused absences or?
That was for a vote. That was for a vote. I mean,
Okay.
my feelings on.
All right. Ren, how do you, Ren, how do you feel about excused absences and defining them?
Well, I think we should definitely set some rules, and it should be, there are obviously situations where people need to be absent. They're sick, or somebody in their family's sick, or whatever. But we need to set it up, and I don't have a formula, but if somebody's absent more than they're present, then we probably need to set it up in the bylaws that they're just automatically removed from membership.
Well, I think a warning would be appropriate, but yeah, and we need to define what that number of absences is. So I agree.
I'm sorry, and that's also based on participation or the lack thereof.
I think that's a separate but related issue. So I believe
They're kind of part and parcel to one another, but I understand the difference between participation and absence. I'm just saying that we should, we all voted to be in here. They should be everyone should partake and do their part for their civic duty. And I don't think that if they're not they're not participating, then, perhaps they shouldn't be removed. I mean, again, they're part and parcel of one another, but I do see the difference between absence versus participating.
Right. Well, I think as of now, board members are we obliged to be on at least one committee? I believe so.
I think it's recommended. I don't think it's obliged.
Okay. And how do we feel about that? Sean?
I mean, the whole purpose, again, this is just me. The whole purpose of this is, I ran because I want to participate in my community.
Right.
Do what I can. And I think that if you took the time to be elected, then you should participate.
Mm-hmm.
It's like going to work, it's like like expecting to get paid for not working. I think if you're going to be a part of this, then you should be a part of this.
If you should, right. You shouldn't have to twist people's arms to participate in the things that,
No, sir.
are going on. Now, granted, of course, we can't be that forceful with this because we are volunteers and, we do have entire lives going on that,
No kidding. Right.
Wait, we don't get paid?
There is that to take into account. And, I feel that, it's, non-participation when you see it, and I think that's a thing that we can, I think you should be, frankly, I think you should have to be on a committee, but.
Okay, well, I think if you guys sort of draft up your ideas, or I'm taking them down for you. If you have further ideas that you can get to us, that would be great. So Nick thinks you should have to be on a committee. I think Jonathan, you have your hand up.
Yes, I am no genius on this stuff, but when I read the bylaws, I think it's inside. There's a lot of information inside what constitutes what are the grounds for censuring and I forget the word that they used to get rid of a board member. I think one of the things is if they're not on any committee. But anyways, that could be research. What I do suggest though is unless something's a problem right now, I think you can just kind of methodically assign things terms. Unless you're solving a problem, I would suggest, this kind of discussion is really important to get to more contentious things that solve problems. But I think things like deciding, what you're talking about right now, it's important to have it codified. It's important to define things, that's for sure. But I don't think anyone really cares as long as it's clear, everybody understands the rules, things like that.
Well, yeah, that's what we're trying to define now. So you're obliged to be on a committee. Nick thinks that a board member should be at least on one committee, and I agree with that. Yeah. So, all right. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would just say I think it would be reasonable to sort of automatically introduce. I think one of the things we struggle with as a board is calling someone out. And so if it is something that is automatically triggered to say, if you've missed 3 consecutive meetings, then there will automatically be a discussion item on the next agenda for whether or not you should be censured or whether or not you should be removed, whichever one we decide is more appropriate. Same with if you have not attended or been on a committee and haven't attended that committee for 3 consecutive meetings or something like that.
Okay.
Oh God, I didn't start my time. Well, I'm done talking.
Okay. I think I like that too. I think we need to give people fair warning too. So you know, things can happen. People get sick. People are traveling, and yeah, I mean, we want to be accommodating, but this is, you know, this takes work, and if people are unwilling, or, you know, and if they change their minds, that's okay too. Then
Yeah.
we make room for someone else. Do we have another question from Jonathan?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. So any more thoughts on this? I think we can.
I will say, in the censure and removal process, you know, the board always has the option to not censure or not remove someone. So that could be sort of the, you know it when you see it. If someone is participating, but happens to be out of town for the meeting dates.
Okay. Option to not censure or remove. Okay. And you think that should stay in, Catherine?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. Good. Okay. So, censure. And
I would
guess-
agree with that. I would agree with that 100% as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think that's a good plan. So censure and removing and timing with respect to elections. So, this is, I think, an important point and may need to be defined a little bit more clearly, is if someone is removed or resigns or is, you know, censured, then it may constitute a problem with respect to the timing of an upcoming election. In other words, you wouldn't want to necessarily put a new board member in if you know, there's only 2 months prior to the next election. To give that person, I think the idea in the bylaws is to not give them an unfair advantage as an incumbent. Catherine, you had some thoughts on that?
Yeah. So whether it is censure or removal, or it is appointing or selecting someone to fill a vacancy, it's sort of about not influencing the upcoming election. So if you were to censure someone or remove someone right before the election, or even just bring it up for a vote, we've all heard, you know, people say, oh, well, they were accused of XYZ, whether or not it's true. It can really color what people think of someone. And so it's just about like a 60-day separation, a 60-day time frame in which you can't make these sorts of decisions or major changes. Seems to be pretty much the norm across other neighborhood council bylaws, and it certainly exists within our bylaws on a couple of these. I would support 60 days. That seems reasonable.
Any other thoughts, comments on the matter? Okay. I would agree with that, Catherine. So moving on to the next item. We're getting through a lot here, folks. So let's see. Resignation. I think we've sort of gone through that process and time frame. I think it just needs to be defined. Community outreach. Just a quick side note here. Catherine and I don't know that we have a current set of standing rules. And so the question is, what's the difference between the standing rules and the bylaws, and why does it matter? And the reason it matters is because standing rules can get more granular and more detailed, and they can be changed more easily than bylaws, which require a 2/3 majority vote, 2/3 majority approval. And we don't necessarily need to go into the details on how certain things are going to be done, like outreach, for example, when it's not going to be a contentious process. It's just laying out a procedure that can be discussed and updated with relative ease in the standing rules. So that's why you'll see cross-reference here from time to time to the standing rules.
I will also point out with standing rules, we do not have to wait for Dunn's open changes period, which sometimes doesn't exist in a particular year. So that's another reason for standing rules.
So we thought we would define community outreach in the standing rules, and let's see what my notes say on that. Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll save that until we get to the standing rules portion of the discussion. But the selection of officers, I think it's also something to be detailed and defined more carefully in the standing rules. I guess we might as well go into that now. Let's see. So the officers of the council shall be the president, one or more vice presidents, a treasurer, secretary, and other officers as shall be approved by the council. We certainly want to consider what's going to happen in the event of a tie. And we had that little anomaly with the vice president situation at our election in July, which is we could have had 2 vice presidents, but it wasn't clear how to proceed. So I simply withdrew, which is fine, but I think that needs to be laid out more clearly so we don't run into something like that again. There are a couple other items related to this, but Ren, any thoughts on officer selection?
No, I don't have any particular thoughts on this. No.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll go forward.
Anyone else? Jonathan, what a surprise.
Thank you. On this point, I think we made a terrible, I think the council made a terrible mistake when there was a tie on who's going to be the president. After having read what the state of California has to say about things like that, we could have done a rotation. We could have done 1 year of one person and 1 year of the other, and that would have clearly represented the outcome of that election. Thank you.
Okay.
Wow. I hadn't even thought of that.
Me neither. It's our fault.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I would have thought of that too, but that is a good idea. So any other thoughts?
I will just note on that the terms for the officers are 1 year, and I believe that's defined. Yeah. So the terms for the officers are currently 1 year. I think doing a rotation within a 1 year period would be a little bit difficult, but I think there needs to be a tiebreaker process. And I don't think it's inappropriate to say one person just gets it based on a reasonable tiebreaker. I think given the short length of the term and the fact that we are volunteers, having to hand off, and I apologize for the siren outside, having to hand off in the middle of 1 year might be a little bit difficult.
Well, that is very noble of you, Catherine. And there is some sense in that because it takes a while to get up to speed and running meetings and so forth. But Kelly, you have a comment?
Well, I just would like to clarify because the terms are 1 year, but in practice, at least what I've observed over the last 8 years is that automatic. I don't think it's ever been that at the end of 1 year, when we're halfway through a 2 year term, that we change the officers unless someone has resigned or moved. So if we adopted something along the lines of sharing in the space, if there's a tie, then the share could happen at the end of the first year, so that the other person could have the second year.
Okay, so how does that differ from what Jonathan was suggesting? A rotation. Okay.
That would ensure that one vote was for 2 years, though, instead of that one vote being for 1 year and then just voting again the next year. And
right. Well, right now we do vote again for the second year, but it's like in practice, It doesn't change.
And if we were to have, since we are in 2 year terms, we vote for that again. If the same result happens again, I think by far and away that's the fairest outcome for sure. But you have to acknowledge I think we have to acknowledge the term. Right. And then, the mechanism by which it happened. But that's if that happens again, and then we're deciding by a coin flip when it happened the first time. And the reality is, the fairness is that we all know what the outcome should have been what the outcome should be if it happens again. So, and that's just fair. You win once, and this isn't huge high stakes. This isn't a military controlling body or anything. But we are we need to we gotta do things right, you know, and I think it, you know, yeah.
Nick, so the fairest outcome would be a rotation. Is that what?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just, if it's going to be a repeat situation of the same situation, that the thing I don't, you know, it comes around to a vote again, right? And so, you know, after a year, and so I don't think it's fair to take that term and not give I mean, you know, there could be legitimately somebody else who wants to come into the next term, or there's a bunch of different things that could happen for the next term. But if the exact same thing happens again, you know, then obviously that's the fairest situation for that. But I don't know how the hell you write that into a bylaw. That just sounds complicated. You know, and it's one of those things, it's like legal wrangling. It's like, you know, half the problem with laws is writing them properly, right? So so anyway, those are my thoughts. I you know, I would love to sit there and profess that I know the answer. I sure don't. But I do know the taste left in my mouth after that. And, you know, and I think the way that, you know, that I certainly felt that it should have been, if there's a 7-7 split and it goes president and vice president, and that's the same split, then obviously the vice president should be represented by the people who lose twice. You know what I mean? Or tie twice, didn't lose anything. Of course, we're not going to have this problem if we have, you know, the kid in there. But I don't know how
I think we should move forward, Nick.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Wrap up your thought.
But anyway, all right. Yeah, okay.
All right, thank you, Nick. So you're in favor of rotation. Let's go with Sean, and unless there are any other comments, we'll make that the last bullet point and comment of the night. No pressure, Sean.
It was already covered, so we're good.
Okay, good. So unless there are any other comments on officer selection and the clarifying of that process, we will close for the evening. And we will come back for more at the next Government Affairs Committee meeting, which will be on, I should say, Tuesday, October 5th at 6:30 p.m. And Catherine, so should we present this to the executive committee or to the board, or should we wait till we have the whole enchilada? Or Ren, how has this been done in the past?
I would recommend that we maybe have some draft red line available for people to review prior to next meeting, but not plan to vote on it, but have it be similar to this one, a working meeting of, if there are specific items we'd like to see changed in the red line, we can talk about them. But for the most part, we'll be going through and seeing the things that we haven't covered yet.
Okay. So did you say some draft red line available at the next meeting? You mean at the next Government Affairs Committee meeting?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll just give a summary at the board meeting, but we won't go into it then. Ren, is that typically how it's been done?
Yeah, I think we want to put together as a committee a draft, and then we'll go through it ideally we'll go through it at the board meeting and fine tune it. Hopefully we won't have to rewrite a bunch of things at the actual board meeting.
Good. Jonathan, you had one comment or
yes, I did. Thank you. Before we close, what I'm not understanding, I clearly understand why it's so important to fix that mechanism for voting so votes don't automatically default to a yes. I understand that. What I'm not understanding is why it isn't of equal, if not greater priority to correct this agenda setting at the governing board meeting. That right now the president is the only one with the power to set that agenda. To me, that is that is the number one important thing, that all board members should be able to sponsor any. Board members typically do not abuse that privilege because they're stuck sitting through the meetings. And I don't even see an abuse at this meeting of people wanting to talk too much or whatever. So I think time is not a problem in this. I've not seen it to be a problem in this neighborhood council. Why is that not one of these priorities with the amendment proposed to fix this problem that I see with the lack of the ability of the board member to contribute to sponsor items on the agenda of the governing board meeting. Thank you. It's a question.
Catherine?
I mean, I can answer why it wasn't included on this one. Merely because we haven't really had a chance to talk about it with the full board. Whereas the concept of abstentions counting as yes votes has been one we've talked about for over a year now. But I don't think it's unreasonable to do another short-term bylaw change if that's something that the board feels is important to get done faster.
Yeah, okay. So, very good. With that, we're going to end this meeting at 8:20. I thank everyone for being here. This is a lot of detail work and it takes time and energy, and we thank you. As I said, yes.
Ren has his hand up.
Yes,
Yeah, I'm
Ren?
sorry. Just what's going on with the post office? Has there been any communication with the congressional office or anyone else about our post office?
Wait, what?
I know of the issue, but I'm not in touch with anyone.
So Nick, to clarify, the building in which the post office is currently on Riverside Drive, the post office lease is up. Is it this year, Ren?
It's already up. Yeah.
And so they've opted not to renew it for like the next 30 years or whatever. And that building is in the process of being redeveloped. And so it will be completely torn down at some point. And the post office has said that when that happens, they're going to depart. And they're not going they're not currently planning to return to that same location or to move to another location within the neighborhood.
But I go there every day.
I go there all the time too. All of us.
I
use it.
literally
It's
go
never
there
not got
every
a
day.
line.
I run an e-com business. I mean, there's so many people. I know. I walk in there all the time, and there's so many e-com people that drop stuff off in there. It's on.
Can I ask a practical question?
I'm sorry,
Ren,
we're late.
Ren, should you've been the point person on this for as long as I can remember. Are Catherine and I taking over that from you? What are you?
Yeah, you need to try and reach the congressional office. And part of the reason that I want to turn it over is because I have had no luck in breaking through into the, and I personally think it is the congressional office that might give us some help on this at that level. Is, that's where you need to get some juice. The local political people and whatever don't have much say about what happens with the post office department.
Ren, would you mind either having a conversation with me or emailing me and Catherine just a short summary of what you've done, who you've chased down, and who has been non-responsive, and then we'll pick up from there.
Okay.
Could you do that? Just
Sure.
so I know if you're not getting anywhere with someone, then I know who that is.
Yeah.
Good. All right.
Thank you, Ren.
So thank you very much. Everybody, thank you for your time this evening. I think we're making progress and it's good to work together. So have a wonderful evening. We're closing this meeting at 8:23. And thank you very much, Catherine.
Have a good evening. Thank you so much.